Right now, as we do on Mondays, we are going to talk some politics with Aaron Van Allen, professor of government at Liberty University. Aaron, good morning. Welcome back to the program.
Well, Brian, thanks so much for having me back this morning.
So, as you noted in the email, you sent over some topics here. The big, beautiful bill did not have a great week in the Senate. You've got Ron Johnson, who wants to go back to pre-pandemic spending levels. You've got Josh Hawley and others complaining about cuts and changes to Medicaid, and Rand Paul just hates everything pretty much. So where do things stand in the Senate? Is this the kind of thing where eventually, sort of like in the House, people get leaned on and it gets passed, or is that more difficult in the Senate?
It's much more difficult in the Senate because in the Senate they have much more leeway and they have much more decorum, and as I would say, in order to that individuals have a little bit, or senators have a little bit more elasticity in the way that they can go about going about doing things, and this is normally why you're going to see the White House that they're going to lean on senators a little bit more in these types of scenarios, and that's what I'm expecting that President Trump is going to do. But as you mentioned, Brian, the big beautiful bill in the Senate did not have a good week. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, he was very hopeful, optimistically cautious, I guess we could say, that they would have some engaging conversations across the board, especially if you start talking about $270 billion in cuts to the SNAP program and then the $800 billion in reductions to Medicaid as well. But Thune has said because of the poor week that they've had, he's actually looking to hit what he called a reset in order to try to get the legislation back on track. And he referenced that the July the 4th holiday, in order to have the legislation signed, is in fact moving away from the GOP quickly at this point. It is something that they want to ensure that they are keeping the momentum behind of them. And so in order to do so, starting this week, he's actually going to break out several smaller working groups to try to figure out where it is that different senators, where it is that they stand and why it is that they can't seemingly get this legislation across the finish line. And as I mentioned a moment ago, that there are two immediate concerns that pop up, and that's Medicaid and SNAP. But you also have those like the Senate Finance Committee Chair, Mike Crapo. He's a Republican from Idaho. He was quoted as last week as stating that the bill is essentially dead in the water and that there's immediately two likely Republican no votes that they would see if the legislation is not changed before July the 4th. But it seems like the largest obstacle that is really in Thune's face at this point are a little bit further demands for deficit reductions, specifically by four separate individuals. Senator Susan Collins from Maine, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Josh Hawley from Missouri, and then Jerry Moran from Kansas. They are vehemently against all of the spending levels that have come over from the House. And so it's really going to be up to Thune to see if he can, in fact, convince some of these holdouts to come on board or what concessions can actually get made. So the legislation still has a very long way to go, and we'll see if these working groups that Thune is attempting to put together this week, if they'll, in fact, be successful. Now,
Gavin Newsome, the governor of California, says he may sue the Trump administration for sending in National Guard troops. Now, to my understanding here, I'll get you to clarify this. They haven't used the Insurrection Act yet, which would let troops have a law enforcement role. Essentially, right now, it's more of a support and protection role. Where do you see this going? The president can, under certain circumstances, federalize the troops. Does Governor Newsome have a legal leg here to stand on?
Governor Newsome thinks that he does, and what Governor Newsome ultimately did when he was speaking to the media over the weekend, he said that the 2,000 plus National Guard troops that Trump had sent in, it all stems back to his executive order, and under that executive order, it explicitly notates. And Newsome referenced this. It's under what is known, or specifically referencing what the Department of Defense did, is that according to Newsome and according to his legal team, the President of the United States and the Department of Defense are required to coordinate with the governor of any state or commonwealth for spending in National Guard troops. And the legal argument that Newsome is making here is that President Trump never coordinated with him, that President Trump merely signed the order, said, and merely informed Governor Newsome that I'm sending in National Guard troops. The first 300 had arrived on Thursday, and then obviously the remainder has come over the past several days, but stating that the president never did that, and that it's not only a break in protocol, it's not only a break in process, but it's also a legal injury as well. And Newsom has continued to say that a lot of the language that President Trump has utilized around this situation, he was actually quoted as stating that it's Orwellian, that President Trump is lying to people, that the actions that he took is unconstitutional, and that merely what President Trump is attempting to do is to make the situation worse. But Governor Newsom had stated that he and local law enforcement actually had the situation under control, and these National Guard troops are merely augmenting the problem. So we're going to have to see what comes of this, but we are expected to see litigation that's actually filed in federal court today from Governor Newsom in the state of California.
Well, it's been an awful long time since we've had a case like this. You have to go back to 1965 with President Johnson calling up the National Guard in Alabama and going expressly over the head of Governor Wallace. I don't know if that turned into a big legal fight then or not, but surely that gives the president some amount of precedent to argue from, that while it's very rare, here's a president who was able to do what I did.
Well, it's absolutely going to turn it. And you referenced the 1965 situation where those National Guard troops were sent into Alabama by LBJ. Any of the big actions that you're referencing from the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights era, all of those turned into big legal right battles, whether you're talking about the sending in of National Guard troops to protect, say, for example, schools, or to put down, as you mentioned in Alabama, to put down different protests, or if you're just talking about education itself, if you were talking about integration itself, all of those turned into knockout, drag-out fights that ultimately many of the states ultimately pushed back on. The big question here is going to be, number one, which judge is initially going to take up this litigation? But number two, how much precedence does actually exist? And I don't know that there's any exact scenario that is like this. Or now, are there similar situations, particularly from the 1960s? Sure. But I have a feeling that Governor Newsom and his team are doing a lot of judge shopping right now to figure out where it is that they can initially get their way.
Yeah, that's something we had to talk about sometime. That really needs to be shut down, but I don't know exactly how you are going to do this. All right, let's get to the fun topic here. The Democratic Party has had a very rough few months. We got a lot of problems at the DNC. Now we have some audio of the chair.
We do. So we actually have some leaked audio of the DNC chair, Ken Martin, that what he was doing was expressing a lot of frustration in a private meeting, not so private, but it was allegedly in a private meeting with a lot of his party members. There were about 10 to 15 folks that were there. And what Chair Martin was doing is that he was really frustrated with some of the infighting that was created by the Vice Chair, David Hogg. And just as a reminder, what Hogg had done some time ago is he had actually stated that he was going to give about $20 million or pump $20 million into various races to fight incumbent Democrats. And quite frankly, those incumbent Democrats that are in areas where they're very, very safe. It doesn't seem as if Democrats would have any real contention from Republicans, but Hogg had stated that he was going to do so because he felt as if the Democrats in some of those areas weren't ineffective, or to be blunt, they just quite frankly got on his nerves. And so what Martin was stating in this meeting, and what this leaked audio actually states, it continues this narrative of the further division and quite frankly the frustration that is existent within the DNC right now, because they can't seemingly all get on the same page to fight Donald Trump. And especially as Trump continues to have, he has more lawsuits on his hands, but he seemingly gets past these lawsuits. Doesn't seem as if the DNC can really get any momentum under their feet. And so what Martin was stating is that my first 100 days in this job have been extraordinarily difficult because what you, David, have done in order to make my life difficult. So the DNC at some point is going to have to clean this up, because they have no unified front to fight Trump. And Trump, as he continues to just really bombard the political sphere with legislation, with many of these pretty bold statements that he's making on legislation that he wants to have passed. The DNC just can't get on board with it, and then you take that into somewhere like the House of Representatives with the ineffectiveness of Hakeem Jeffries and House Democrats. That just sows even deeper frustration for the party. So we're going to see if they can actually reconcile and if Martin can actually bring folks together. But there's been an overwhelming support for Martin from Democrats, saying that he showed his leadership and that's why he's in the position. But he's going to have to do something fast in order to get this boat down the road.
All right, we will pop some popcorn and we'll see just exactly what happens with them. Aaron Van Allen, professor of government at Liberty University, thanks for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back, guys.